Trump's tariffs have roiled financial markets and caused confusion among investors over the past week. The president on Wednesday imposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from Canada. He has paused until April 2 penalties on Canadian oil and gas as well as duties on other goods that are compliant with the trade agreement that governs North America. The Trump administration has not provided clarity on how much of Canada's energy exports to the U.S. conform to the trade agreement. Oil and gas that is not compliant would face a 10% tariff. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright declined to provide details when asked Monday by CNBC. Smith said Wednesday that Canadian oil producers are busy filling out paperwork to ensure that their exports to the U.S. are compliant. There was a bit of a paperwork issue that our companies had, Smith said. There was no reason to register, and so now there is. I would imagine that they've all called their lawyers and they're in compliance. I wouldn't expect very much of our oil and gas is tariffed at all. But it is unclear whether Trump will proceed with tariffs when his pause expires on April 2. Wright said Monday a deal with Canada that avoids tariffs on oil, gas and other energy certainly is possible, but it's too early to say. We can get to no tariffs or very low tariffs, but it's got to be reciprocal, Wright said in an interview with CNBC's Brian Sullivan. It will take time for Alberta to pivot to markets beyond the U.S. if the tariffs do go into effect. Nearly all the pipelines in Canada run south to the U.S. Canada only has one pipeline stretching from Alberta to the country's west coast in British Columbia, providing access to Asian markets. There are no pipelines that run from Alberta to the country's east coast. Smith said Canada is looking at 3 different pipeline proposals to its west coast, at least one pipeline into the Northwest Territories, one into Manitoba, one to the Hudson Bay, and one into eastern Canada. Those are conversations we were not having 3 months ago, Jean said of the pipelines. But it took 12 years for Canada to expand its Trans Mountain pipeline that connects to the country's west coast. Alberta is not interested in taking a page from Ontario's playbook, Jean said Tuesday. Premier Doug Ford imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S. in response to Trump's tariffs. He later suspended the penalty after the U.S. agreed to resume talks. We don't believe that this is the right way to do it, Jean said of Alberta's position. We want to de-escalate the situation. Canada has presented the U.S. with several options, the Alberta Energy Minister said. Jean declined to provide specifics, but he said the Trump administration needs a strong strategic petroleum reserve to achieve its goal of energy dominance. It also means that they have to be able to continue to get a good steady supply of product from Canada, he said. If the tariffs go into effect, they will hurt both Canadians and Americans, particularly people who cannot afford a price increase, he said. The price hike will be split fairly evenly between U.S. customers and producers in Canada, he said. It's going to be felt by all parties and frankly there's many people right now that can't afford it, he said. We need to think about those people because they're the less fortunate that truly have no other choice but to buy fuel. Jean took a swipe at Trump's repeated calls for Canada to become the 51st state. As long as we're in charge, we don't mind, Jean said. But the truth is the Republicans would never be elected again.